All right, everybody. 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'm Josh Madsen checking in from the Free Heel Life bunker these days where I'm at, and wanted to get back on the horse and do a little live stream for y'all. Obviously, this is for Black level members. So first off, thank you for all your support. Becoming members on YouTube at the Black level means so much to me. Just a little bit on that is, most of you are, especially that are supporting the YouTube channel, are aware I closed my brick and mortar shop back in the spring. It was a good thing. It was a long time coming too, and there's a lot of reasons. Maybe we'll talk about it at some point. But it's been great, and I was excited to make that transition. But what I'm more excited about is as I'm doing this stuff moving forward, whether it's live streams, YouTube content, selling used gear, parts, selling my skis, selling my lifestyle stuff. I really want it to be supported directly through the people. And I feel like I've always been a big believer in that, in telemark having its own support system, industry, if you want to call it that. That's what I've called it in the past. But I think really what it is just this deeper support system that's the people that are interested in telemark specifically. And at least for my little business, this is a great way to keep it at a scale that makes sense, and things like a paywall show support in a way that I think is really important. If all of you out there are getting something that's of value to you and you're willing, to pay a monthly fee for it or whatever it may be, or even buying a t-shirt, that sort of relationship goes back and forth. It allows me to do stuff, create more content, come up with more designs or events or whatever it may be. And I just really want to hammer that home, as I move forward, how incredibly important I think that is for telemark and being a protector of the turn, and all of you out there that want to protect the turn and pass it on to your friends and family and the people around you. So all of that to say, thank you very much for being a supporter of the YouTube channel. And I'm really excited to do the live stuff. I did, for those of you that responded to the community note on YouTube and said, hey, yeah, we definitely want to, see the lives come back. I think that's great. I've done an hour in the past. We'll see if today goes an hour. I would like to stay just more consistent. I think I'm probably going to do the first Tuesday of the month. Famous last words, right? Because then once it's recorded, then I'm locked in forever. But I think that'll work well for me. Something around this time. I feel like 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. It's, at least in the United States, it gets the West Coast people are just getting off work. East Coast people are probably home. If you're elsewhere in the world, somewhere in Europe, Japan, obviously you're probably going to catch this later unless you're up at some crazy hour of the night. But I'm going to try to focus on these and, probably just topically what is coming up around me. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the TX Pro 2.0, little debrief on it since I've had it for, been skiing a little over a month on it. And I guess I want to give a little background to kind of start this because, I think part of what's interesting is if you're here and you're paying for this content, obviously there's something of value, hopefully there that you're seeing and you want to hear my opinion. I feel very grateful that I'm in a position where I can actually share my thoughts on something and someone's actually going to pay for it. That means a lot to me. I'm very humbled by that. And never thought in a million years when I started telemark skiing over 30 years ago that I'd be, one, I didn't know what the internet would be. That's for sure. And definitely wasn't, it never crossed my mind like, hey, somebody's going to want to hear my opinion on gear. I was never really a gear nerd in the traditional sense of it. I wasn't going out and buying the latest stuff. Most of my life, I was a ski bum. I don't know if I'm much else than that now. I still feel kind of in the same shoes. So But my background, just with the boot specifically, I think this might be cool and maybe important. Hopefully, it's some cool facts for you that are listening to this that might think, hey, this gives kind of a little extra maybe credibility to it or something like that. Is the first thing is I was part of a very, very small group of testers right from the beginning of this. And so I actually started testing a new boot, not what this exact boot is, but a new boot in 2017, and went over to Italy, over to Oslo, where the Scarpa headquarters is. And I mean, same thing, completely humbled. I mean, I'm going to the mecca of telemark ski boots, and there's so much history there, and was able to kind of start this test process. I knew there was a new boot coming back in 2016, 2017 when I went over there, and then I was able to ski on it. So a lot of the experiences over the course of time, I guess that was a 7-year process, I guess. 6-7 years of development. And I can share some stuff for sure. I definitely have an NDA that I signed during that time that I was doing that. So I can't exactly explain every single aspect of it, but I think it was pretty well known. Like, I was part of this test team, and I was able to get a hold of these boots very early on. And what I can say about it is there was definitely a lot of ups and downs, I think, when you're developing any product. But something like this where, really we haven't had a new telemark boot since 2000 and I'll say 2011, because that's when TX Pro came out. We had the TX, the early orange version, and then the TX Pro comes out. And I believe TX Comp either that same year or followed a year after that. So that's a really long stretch of time with no new boots, and definitely created a lot of interest, demand, curiosity. What kind of boot was this going to be? And I think it's safe to say that the early part of what I think the public was aware of was, they really thought that we needed this lightweight backcountry boot. And so I'll just touch on that a little bit, because my thought process has always been kind of interesting with that, because although backcountry is such an incredibly important part of telemark and snow sports in general, it's growing, and there's always this argument, backcountry is the fastest growing segment of the snow world, etc. In telemark, this is backcountry. I'm taking this from my buddy Craig Dosty. Backcountry skiing grew through telemark in the 80s, 90s, into the early 2000s. And I think it has a really important history with us. I think it's a very important piece of the puzzle. I don't necessarily think that's where it's going to grow. So I always was a little hesitant to see just a very specific backcountry boot, because I know that that's not where the majority of the potential lies in terms of new users, people that are getting interested in it, and so on. For people that are existing users, existing backcountry skiers, 100%. It's great to have this boot that's there. So just that little bit on the development side, I think what's been interesting is to see what came out in the very end. And I was talking about in the podcast I did when I first put a podcast up this year with Dosty, and we were joking around I was joking around that they called it TX Pro. I was excited for like a new name, and all of a sudden we got the same name. Not even 2.0. So if I call it 2.0, that's my protest. The other aspect, I think, so being part of the development team was a big part. 2017, I opened my retail shop in 2014, in the fall of 2014. The other aspect that I felt maybe lends a little bit of information for all of you that are out there listening, and is and I say this again with complete humility, and I hope it comes across that way, because I'm not trying to say it like, hey, because of this, you should totally listen to me. Like, obviously, I've got my own opinions, and if you like them, cool. If you don't, that's fine too. But where I'm drawing some of this stuff from is also this background, which is, for most, I would say probably, I opened in 2014 as a retail shop. I would say by that same time when we started testing the boots, I was already, or Freeheel Life was already the #1 Scarpa telemark boot retailer in the world. Now, for a small business like mine, that's a big deal, because I felt like that was really great for us to show, hey, we're willing to take the risk, we're willing to take in the product. And, that just was an incredibly cool thing to be able to say, is, we're able to compete against all the big dogs. And mostly because, I think we had an advantage because a lot of people didn't want to touch telemark. They weren't interested in it. They didn't have the expertise, and so on. But with all that said, we pushed out a lot of boots over the years. And, I think it was great to be able to have this retail component that put me in touch with being able to talk to people directly, and to really, truly, basically be in a position to not only talk to people face to face, but understand where they were coming from, and I think that that's been a really, really important part. So that's kind of my background with the boot, in terms of, being on this test team. And I'd say in the US there was maybe half a dozen. And then Europe sort of had their own group that was testing the boot also. And we didn't have a whole lot of connection with those folks, at least as testers. There was some in France and Italy and sort of those areas. And I will say that they were definitely pushing more this direction, like this alpinist sort of boot. What I would say is where telemark sort of came from. And then I would say I was bringing sort of not only a user aspect, but sort of a retail aspect. So take all of that into account. When I form my opinions, I'm definitely coming from probably that angle, not as just a sole user of a boot. I generally, now I don't have a retail shop, and I'm not retailing the new boots online, but I am always sort of looking at it from a general user standpoint, and not so much like, hey, this is what I do, this is the kind of boot I want. And I think that's important, because most times when people are sharing opinions online like this, they're looking at it sort of, hey, this is what kind of boot I want and I think everybody needs. I'm sort of bringing it back and saying, here's what I think from selling all the boots over the years. This is, I think, what we need. And also, here's what I like on a personal level. So I'll probably mix it up a little bit here and there. That's just my background and kind of how I've always looked at stuff. So let's get into it. TX Pro 2.0. I did a video back, I think on December 9th, sort of my initial impressions of going out. I did a short backcountry day, probably hiked, for a little over an hour, got a little bit of vertical in, skied some, mellow powder runs, some dad pow, back to the truck. So I really got a feel that day for the aspects of this boot that might differ from what I've used previously, which traditionally I would ski TX Pro in the last 5 years. I also did, and here's another kind of fun fact. I don't think a lot of people maybe caught on to this in certain videos over the years, but the TX Comp, when they came out with the stiffer version of the old boot, the TX Comp, and this is like the gray green version, there was a few pairs made for certain individuals that had a tech toe. And so people had always wanted this, there was always everyone talking out in the world, we need this boot, we need this TX Comp, this stiffer boot with a tech toe, because we don't want to just have TX Pro. And at the time, you were just getting to the end of the TX, which was the softer version of the boot that was kind of similar to a T2. Now, from that aspect, it was, I had an advantage because I could ski the stiffer boot, the TX Comp, with a tech toe in Lynx and Majo and all of these bindings that most people couldn't. But I also couldn't really show it because they didn't really want that to be out in the open. That, hey, you guys actually did put a tech toe in this boot the whole time. Why didn't the public get it? And there was kind of some other stories with that. So anyways, going back, this first backcountry day, overall impression was, I talked about buckles. I'm still a fan of the buckles. I like that they've gone to a three, you can see right here, they've kind of gone to this 3 buckle configuration. This is probably one of the highlights for me is these opposing buckles where the instep strap pulls down this direction and this one pulls this direction. I love that. For, I even early on, people that were modifying boots and stuff, there was times where I would see people flip-flop them like that if they could. And I think that's a great feature. I like it just because this one obviously keeps your heel down into the heel pocket really nice. And I just like the opposing forces. I just feel like I get a better fit that way. Awesome that they went back to this ratchet strap, and amazing that you can swap it out. We will see. Scarpa is known for not being really good with having a lot of parts on hand. So I'm curious to see if they keep a lot of parts in stock for now that it's replaceable on the new boot. Are they going to have a bunch? So hopefully, but yeah, I've said this in previous videos. The old boot, you had to like drill this part out. Oh, whoops, I'm holding it the wrong way. You used to have to, and probably this one too. This is epoxied in. And so this strap used to go around this, and you had to drill this out, and it was very, very difficult to do without melting the boot because of the heat and everything that was happening there. So buckle configuration, I'm still super psyched on. I've been skiing, resort and backcountry on it, and I like that they went to I don't think it matters how many buckles you have. Obviously, it's 3 buckle with a power strap, but I think it's amazing that they were able to just kind of get rid of those 2 top buckles and just go, hey, we're going to put 1 big buckle on there. I mean, it's an obvious update because Alpine boots and some of these other ones, still had those. So I think that's been really good. And yeah, I think as far as that first day to now, there was a couple things I brought up, like the liner. I wasn't a big fan initially of the liner, and a lot of this is more skepticism. Again, I'm bringing 6 or 7 years of being around this, and some things haven't changed a lot, and I wasn't totally convinced that certain things were going to line up how I was hoping they would line up. I will say this, the new Debrief in terms of like, now I've skied it in the resort super hard. I mean, I've skied steeps, I've skied crud, I've skied POW, I've railed on it with groomers, with carving skis. I hit rails, I hit jumps. So I've kind of taken it through the whole process, like everything that you could probably throw at the boot, at least in that 1 month period of time, I feel like I've done it and I haven't had any major failures and nothing's really stuck out to me, you know? So the liner I thought was going to be it is sort of paper thin, you know, when I first put that liner on, I molded it and I knew this was coming because all of the test boots were similar. I've used the word svelte, you know, like that boot is much, you know, kind of narrower and they got rid of a lot of material. And I think with that, they, you know, to shave even more weight, that liner's quite a bit more lightweight. And we'll see if it holds up over time. But I'll tell you, skiing on it, I didn't have any issues. You know, it felt comfortable, especially once I got to the resort and I was just sort of hammering laps over and over and over. Felt good, felt solid, and I was pretty surprised. So the one thing I did mention in that first video too was I talked a lot about this ski walk mechanism. And I'll be honest, I'm still skeptical on this thing from a general user standpoint. From a backcountry standpoint, totally makes sense to me. I just, I was worried that this might not hold up long term. And maybe that's just my own concern because I'm so used to having a locking mechanism like on the old one. You know, this thing like locks down. But I get it. It doesn't make sense for this particular boot to have this sort of thing in terms of weight, and it's just kind of overkill for something that's kind of geared more to backcountry, at least in my opinion. It looks more like a backcountry boot. But I will say, just overall, the biggest thing that I was impressed with was, and this is the sign I look at for equipment, is does the new equipment, whatever it may be, if it's on my feet, especially if I'm talking skis, boots, or bindings, does it stop me in my like literally stop me and make me think something's different? I think this is an underappreciated fact of telemark skiers. Is telemark skiers are all about feeling. They're all about the maintaining that feeling for a long period of time. In terms of every time you get new gear, you don't want to have to start over. You don't want to have to start everything over and basically relearn telemark skiing at all. And there was a moment where I got to the resort day where I was really just hammering laps over and over. I was swapping skis out. And I just remember thinking, interesting. I haven't thought about my boot in terms of the performance of it. It just felt like I was skiing on my old TX Pros or whatever boot. It wasn't affecting my skiing. That is a really good sign. The backstory on that and why I've been skeptical is because during that test process, even up until the last boot that I tested, and this is part of the process. So if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, of course, you're still working out the kinks. But it kind of got to the point where I wasn't sure the kinks might get worked out. And the biggest thing I was always worried about, again, I talked about sole flex. Dossie and I talked about this in the podcast. The ability for a sole to flex is so important because you need to pressure the ball of the foot. But the other thing I was really worried about, because of some experiences I had, was that this part of the boot right here, that ability to sort of just flex the ankle, I didn't know if that was going to be there or not. And that was the biggest surprise on the final product, is the ankle flex. Flex was good. I was able to flex really well. And like I said, I didn't notice it. It wasn't something that came up in my mind and was a hindrance. I wasn't thinking, man, what a pain in the ass this boot is. And over the years, I will just say there was moments where that was going to be the point that was sticking out to me. Hey, this might not go the right way. Overall impression though is it skis pretty well. I've been sort of floor testing it to kind of get a feel for the bellows next to old TX Pro. And I'm going to start doing some more floor tests, and I'm going to head out skiing later this week and see if I can get on slope with one of each boot. Because I just kind of, at least on the floor test, old TX Pro is actually feeling closer to TX Pro 2.0. I actually think, I know the TX Pro 2.0 bellow, which actually is made differently. It's got a different way that it flexes. If you look at it, the way it kind of squishes together definitely is different, but it's much softer than old TX Pro. And I don't mind it. If you've kind of watched videos of mine in the latter years, I think softer is better a lot of times. I always talk about that softer bellow, and maybe I just need the lateral stiffness, but the stiff bellow, I don't really need stiff bellow and bindings in terms of the springs to really accomplish what type of skiing I want to do. I can ski hard, but I want to make sure that I can flex it without just overpowering the boot. This fits the bill. I personally don't. I know that they're going to come out with a TX comp. I saw some photos of that. Somebody posted online. Be interesting to see what aspects of that boot they make stiff. And because I really feel like the bellows is the big, I mean, I don't know how much stiffer you can go on a TX comp, the cuff. I mean, you could probably go a little in that ankle flex that I'm talking about. Maybe racers would like that, or hard charging young folks or old folks. But we all know, like, younger people probably want to they're going for the stiffer gear. I honestly, I don't know how much stiffer they can go, and I don't really know where or why they would do that, but they might. So as far as, we talked a little bit about touring. I mean, that's kind of the easy one. 100% the touring's better than the old boots. The ski walk mechanism, I'm not totally sold on. Probably just personal preference on that one. It works fine. Like I said, I hit rails. I was doing grabs and jumps and smashing down on the ground and hard compressions. Didn't pop out. So it seems to be working fine so far. First video, I was talking about the liner. I haven't had any issues with that. I think it's just whether it kind of holds up over time. No issues there. So I think a lot of the skepticism that I had from that first video to now, most of my fears have sort of disappeared about how it was going to perform. And I thought that's when it would come out, is going to a resort and just hammering laps, going over and over, doing different things with it. And I thought that's when it would stick out to me, because when I was in that test process during that period of time, that's always when I would feel it touring on certain aspects of test boots. But where it really stood out was when I could take lap after lap on a lift served run. And I just didn't feel that. So it's working great. And that's good because it's a $900 boot. So I'm glad that it works, spending 900 bones on this thing. I'm really glad that it's skiing the way that it's supposed to ski. So kind of trying to think if there's a whole, honestly, that's kind of what was funny about doing the debrief video. I wanted to do this. I was going to do like a normal video, but like nothing really, I don't know, like nothing. The funny thing I said in that first December 9th video was I said, yeah, it's just a boot. And you know, what's funny is I kind of feel the same way. It doesn't even have that many bells and whistles other than like the range of motion, and it's lighter. But yeah, it just kind of skis like a normal telemark boot in an updated fashion, which I think is exactly what we needed. We needed a boot that was updated, that you know, felt more modern after waiting from 2011. So like what, like 13 years or something like that. That's a long time to wait for a new boot. So I think this at least gets it in the pocket of, hey, we have a boot that's using materials and technology in 2024, and now we're kind of up to date. Obviously, that TX comp's going to come out. It'll be interesting to see, does that spur on a line of boots or not? I'm going to be interested to see. The biggest move that Scarpa could pull specifically would be, will they ever eliminate T2 Eco men and women's boot, which is the last remaining 3-buckle 75 millimeter boot? And would they ever eliminate T4, which is the 2-buckle low cuff boot? I don't know. I've always thought that those are kind of good boots to live in the 75 millimeter realm. They definitely fit certain skiers, old and young, and it just is kind of like a something that's there that works really well. I would be surprised. I could see them doing that with the T2 Eco, is like make a TX. Like I mentioned, the old TX boot was soft. It was like a T2. It was already a 3-buckle back then. That would be kind of cool. And I think that would make a pretty stellar lineup. You know, you'd have like, go back, TX, since we're sticking with the same names, TX, TX Pro, TX Comp, and maybe you call it good there. I'd be kind of super bummed if they cut the T4, because I feel like that's just that in-between realm of, you're not an NNN Nordic person, but you're not really like a telemark skier in the way of downhill performance is the only thing you need, which is you get into these bigger boots, typically you're using what we're talking about. And I feel like the T4 is kind of a cool carryover from history to actually be something that's good there, you know? So that's my take. I would like to see that happen, is maybe they go into the T2 world, go one softer than TX Pro, or even lower cuff. Maybe, I don't know how much softer you can go on the bellows, to be honest. Maybe that's a boot I need to try next to it, now that I'm thinking of it, is T2 or old TX, and kind of see where the softness goes in terms of the new TX Pro 2.0. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. I'm surprised. I mean, based on 1 month of skiing, I mean, it just seems like a kind of what I always thought. You just need to update the TX Pro. This is an updated version. It's not super over the top. And other than some of the features and the looks that make it look like a backcountry boot, I think it'll work. I think it'll work for the majority of people, you know, and the little stuff like the ski walk mechanism that I get irritated by, that'll probably just go by the wayside. It won't matter to a resort skier. At least I'm not seeing that from my experiences so far. And, you know, it'll work for people that don't have a lot of either weight or ability to press the ball of the foot on the uphill ski in a telemark turn. I think that is the advantage of this newer boot, is it's even easier to flex that front part of the boot. That's what I was worried about, and not being able to flex the ankle. I haven't felt that so far. So I guess my fears have dissipated, into the ether. I'll be curious kind of like what to see comes next. And I don't know. Honestly, I don't even know how much there is to talk about this boot moving forward, other than go ski it and make better videos that are just fun skiing. But, like I said, I appreciate if you've tuned in and you're listening to this. Thank you for being curious about my opinion. I actually wouldn't be afraid to buy this boot unchanged. Whereas I was even nervous. That's why I told you I wanted to buy a $900 boot, because I was like, all right, no discounts. You really want to believe in something when it's that expensive. And I thought that was really, really important. So, it's a lot of money. I mean, I never thought we'd be, close to $1,000 for a pair of telemark boots when I started telemarking a long time ago. Even when the plastic boots were expensive in the early days, this is, I guess just sign of the times. Boots are expensive. They're going to last you a long time if you're skiing 20, 30 days a year. And, but I don't have any, I guess I don't have any hesitations now. And obviously this isn't a paid advertisement because I have no affiliation with Scarpa any longer, but, that's kind of my take on that. So, like I said, I'm going to head out and do some skiing. I'm going to go to a cool little resort on, Friday. It's Tuesday right now. So hopefully some of the content you see, whether you're watching this tonight or, in the near future, some of the videos that are coming after, hopefully I'll get some good stuff. I'm just going to be doing some solo content and whatnot. But that's my debrief on the TX Pro 2.0. It's a boot. Still a boot. And it works just fine. And like I said, unless you guys have questions out there, you can hit me up, team@freehilllife.com. And that kind of keeps everything separated out a little bit so I can find it. You can comment below. That's probably easier since you're watching a video. Comment, or you can even text me at the number on the website, 801-450-9986. And happy to answer questions and go back and forth. But yeah, honestly, there's not a whole lot of exciting stuff. I mean, maybe people are going to debate the boot back and forth, and maybe it doesn't work for people, but that's telemark. Some stuff doesn't work. If I felt, like I said at the beginning, if I felt like this boot wasn't going to work for the majority of people, I would 100% speak up, because I think that would have really put us in a pickle, not having access to the older versions of the boot and this not working for the majority of people. That would have stunted the growth at some point of people being able to get into telemark. Obviously, they got to get over the cost of it, but I feel like if I had this in a rental fleet, if I was still doing that, the average person could get on and like make a turn, and it would feel not crazy. It's not over, the boot's not overbearing. So I guess I'm happy. So stamp of approval. There you go. Skiing well. We'll get back to some other live stream content and hopefully some more interesting stuff than nerdy gear reviews, unless you guys have something that pops up. There might be a couple new things out there. I know like 22 Designs has that Bandit binding. I haven't bought a pair yet. Some buddies of mine that bought them have been skiing them, and yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound too different. Again, there's nothing like too crazy out there right now that I think, oh yeah, like this is just, like monumental, like going from like leather to plastic or like 75 to NTN. You know, I think this is just a good continuation, it looks like, of people are trying to innovate, make small movements. I'm all about small movements over large ones. And surprisingly, this boot kind of fits that bill. I think it's smaller changes than bigger ones. So I'm stoked about that. Anyways, for all of you, again, thank you for your support. And I couldn't do this without you. I'm excited to be doing this, and hopefully that was a good little live stream TX Pro 2.0 debrief. And until next time, spread telemark always, my friends. Peace out.